Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. As per usual, I have a really fun seasonal video for you guys. I started out my Christmas content a couple weeks ago, so if you missed any of those videos, my last couple of videos have been very Christmassy and fun, so you can check those out. And also, I know my door is open. It's kind of broken. Don't know if you can see that, but yeah, you can't close it, so sorry. But anyway, today I have a big list of Christmas decor DIYs. I have some ornaments, I have something to do with like jars and just all the Christmas things. I have a very big variety of projects and they're all super inexpensive and easy. And if you're like me, I'm a very cheap college student, so this is where I thrive. So I have the ultimate list for you guys and I'm really excited to be sharing this with you. And if you are new, make sure that you subscribe and you give this video a thumbs up to let me know that you like this video. This video took a lot of work, so I'd really appreciate it. I've been working on these for 2 to 3 weeks. I have the best DIY video that I have made yet. So enough talking, let's get into the crafts. To kick off this video, we are first going to start small and we're going to work our way up. So we're going to start with some very simple ornament DIYs. These tags I got from Michael's for just a few dollars and it's literally a 50 pack. I think they have smaller packs than these, but this is just what I found in the store. And we're going to start by painting it whatever color we'd like. I chose a white color. Of course, you can do whatever colors you like. And I'm going to be showing you 2 different versions of this. So we're just going to go through and we're going to try to make sure the color is nice and solid. I think for the white, I did 3 coats on each side, obviously letting it dry in between coats. Now that we have a finished white ornament, we are going to put on our design. Now, if you saw my shop with me video, there were ornaments that were very similar to these that this was kind of inspired by. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to sketch out the word joy. And I'm going to use the end of my paintbrush here to make little dots. You can also use some sort of toothpick or anything that just has a really small tip. And this is just a really simple design and I love the simplicity of it. Now we're going to take our second one, we're going to make something a little bit different. I am going to explain this whole tree process a little bit more later on. We're going to be doing something a little bit more big scale, but I'm just taking a few shades of green and I'm going to be making a little tree. And I'm also putting some little ornaments on there and some snow. And it's just a really simplistic, very minimalist boho sort of style of ornament. But you can get really creative with this. You can do any design you want. And it's just really fun to be able to mix things up a little bit when it comes to decorating the tree. Now we're going to get into making the actual part that's going to hang off the tree. So we're going to take some white thread and we're going to put it through that hole. And I'm going to take the 2 pieces of thread, the 2 different sides, and I'm going to try to make them equal. And I'm going to thread them through a needle. This just makes it so much easier to put on the beads that we're going to be putting on. Again, you can use any colors you want. I just have a big thing of wood beads from the craft store. And of course you can paint these or leave them plain just like this. And I'm just going to stack up a few on there. Now we're going to take a little piece of twine and we're going to knot it and we're going to take the 2 pieces of thread and we're going to tie it on there to make sure it's secure. And that's really as simple as it gets. I love these ornaments. They're very simplistic and they're just, I feel like they just are going to look so beautiful on a tree. You can just make so many different sets of these and they would just be so beautiful. So this is a really easy, inexpensive way to make some personalized and fun ornaments for the tree. Next, we're going to be getting into another DIY ornament, and this was something that I saw on Pinterest that I thought was really fun. We're going to be making a tassel ornament, and as you can see, I sort of put one end of the yarn in between one of my fingers, and we're going to wrap it around all 4, just so I kind of have a good hold on the end, and we're going to make it whatever thickness we want. I thought that this thickness was perfect, and it just worked really well, and now I'm going to take one more piece piece of yarn that I'm going to cut, and this is how we're going to sort of join everything together. We're going to join all of those loose ends. I'm going to work it up towards my hand, towards the top of it, and we're just going to knot it just because we want to make sure everything stays in place. Alright, so now that we have that tied, we have a little bit of a mess, but in the middle of that hole, we're going to pull it tight with our scissors and we're just going to cut. Now you can sort of see where this is probably going to go. We're going to trim everything up a little bit and we're going to take one more piece of yarn and wrap it around at the top. That gives it that sort of signature tassel feel. And I'm just going to knot it a couple times just to make sure that everything is in place, and then I'm just going to snip the end. Now we're going to gather it at the bottom and we're going to trim it up to however short we want, and there it is. It takes a little bit of practice, but it only took me 1 or 2 tries just to figure it out, and it's super easy and there's so much you can do with it. Now in terms of the look of this ornament, it's very similar compared to the first one I showed you. I'm going to be sticking my needle through the top of the tassel just to give us that 2-sided thread, and then we're going to cut it to length, and then we're going to put it through the needle again. And I also decided to do beads. You could do lots of different colors, lots of different shapes. You could do different patterns. I just sort of went in a random pattern with these wood beads. We're going to build it up to as long as we would like, and then we're basically going to do the same thing that we did with the other ornament. Again, I love the simplicity of this, and I think making tassels is actually a lot easier than I thought. It's a really fun boho DIY sort of touch that you can add to anything, and it looks so beautiful on the tree. Now I've got a little bonus DIY for you guys. So going back to the tassels, I'm starting with a canvas, and I have it painted a sort of beige color with a little stump on the bottom, and I have 10 of these tassels. Now of course everything is going to depend on the size of your canvas and everything, but for me 10 was the perfect amount, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to lay out the design of my tree. Again, this is another thing that I saw on Pinterest and I thought I could totally make that myself, and I'm going to go through with my hot glue gun and I'm just going to put everything in place. I highly recommend laying everything out before you hot glue it and just sort of gluing it where it is. It just really makes it a lot easier, and of course you can add decorations and such to this, but I love the simplicity of it. And just for a little extra insurance, I'm putting a little bit on the tassel-y part, if you will, just to make sure everything's in place. This is really fun and simplistic, and this is a great DIY. Honestly, you can make so many different shapes with it. It's very simplistic. You can make it neutral, you can make it traditional green and red. There's so many things you can do with it to make it your own, and it's super easy once you get the hang of it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about mini signs. I love mini signs. They're really good for filling in space on shelves or anything like that, and also tiered trays. This is just a small 4x4 piece of wood. I believe it's aspen. It's a very light wood, and I'm going through and painting it after, of course, having sanded it down and cleaned it off. I'm choosing a white paint here, an acrylic, and I'm just going to do a few coats of this on both the front and the back, making sure that it dries really well. It's something that I really want to emphasize. If you don't wait long enough, sometimes the paint tends to pill on itself, and you just have to be very patient. And once you get the front and the sides done, you can flip it over once it's completely dry and do the back. as that dries, we're going to work a bit on our design. I like to make a lot of my designs on Photoshop just because I like to be able to personalize it. I was really inspired by this sort of ornament look, so that was sort of what I was going for, but you can really do anything on any sort of sign. And I'm going through and I decided to put merry and bright on it and add a few different decorations. Now I made this on a transparent file if that's something that interests you, and I saved it as a PNG. And I'm actually going to go onto my phone to the Cricut app, the Cricut Design Space, and I downloaded it there and I was able to print it off. So for this sign, I wanted to do it in vinyl, and a paper cutter makes it a little bit easier. You definitely don't have to have a paper cutter, but I just use a random black piece of vinyl that would fit our sign well, and we are going to put it in the machine. For this, it doesn't really matter what color vinyl you use, just because we're not going to be leaving it there. It's just going to be a stencil for this one, but we're going to be touching a little bit more on vinyl a little bit later. Now that we have our design cut out, I'm going to take my little weeding tool from my Cricut and I'm going to be taking out our design. So essentially I'm going to be painting where all of my vinyl is missing, if that makes any sense. It'll make a little bit more sense as we get closer, but everything that I want to be painted is what I'm going to be weeding out. So now we're going to be putting our design onto our signs. So at this point I didn't have any transfer tape, so you can just use masking tape or painter's tape like this, and I just want to make sure everything is nice and straight so I can easily put it on the sign and make sure that it's square. I'm going to sort of adhere it to the tape and it should come right off. Now we're just going to make sure everything is centered, and this is where we really need to go in with really anything. I use my weeding tool. You can also use some sort of like credit card or anything like that just to make sure it sticks really well. Typically vinyl sticks really well to wood. It's just really nice to have that insurance and make sure everything is all set to go. Now I'm just going to give it one final sort of rub to make sure everything is adhered and there's no bubbles. And I'm just going to tape off the edges that are exposed just to make sure that if I do get a little bit messy, I'm not going to ruin my sign. So I'm going to go in with the same color of my sign. Again, this depends on what color you paint it. In this case, I'm going to do white. This is going to ensure that we have a good sort of pocket for our actual color of paint to sit. So I'm going to do a couple coats of that, and we're going to make sure that it's completely dry so we don't get any sort of washed out color. And the color that I was going for was a green color. It wasn't too far off of what I had. I just added a little bit of white, and we are going to go over our design. And it's really important to make sure that you don't have any big bubbles or any big splatters or anything like that. You want to make sure it's a nice thin coat, and we're going to go in and do a couple coats to make sure that it's good. And while it's still wet, after we finish our final coat, we're going to take it off. This seems a little bit crazy and a little bit messy. Yes, you do get paint all over yourself, but I've had so much experience where if I let it dry completely, the paint peels off as I take all of the vinyl off. And now we're going to clean it up a little bit. I loved how this sign turned out. I think it's very simplistic. It takes a little bit of patience, and of course, if you have a Cricut, it's a lot easier to be able to do this, but you can really personalize it and make it your own, and it's a really fun thing to do on a day where you just want to sit down and do a fun craft. So I'm excited to use this in upcoming Christmas videos. Okay, I wanted to pause the video really quick to show you guys what I use to finish my projects, and I essentially do this for anything that I paint just to make sure nothing chips and it just stays on there really nicely. So I use this Krylon clear matte matte finish, and it's essentially just like a permanent finish. There's no glossy sheen, no yellowing. It's moisture resistant and it dries really, really fast. I'll usually do this out on my front porch or just like outside, and I will give it a nice sort of even coat, let it dry for 20 minutes or so, and it's usually pretty good by then. This is something that's really, really nice. I have a couple bottles of these and it just makes your products last a lot longer. And I honestly don't think I could have done a DIY video without mentioning something to do with a mason jar. With this DIY, you can use any shape, any size, and mason jars are very inexpensive. And I'm going to be taking a Crayola marker, I believe is what the brand is. You just want to make sure that you're able to wipe it off easily. And I'm going to be sketching out a little Christmas tree. Now, we'll sort of see where this all leads in a second. Now I'm going to take some twine, and I just want to make sure that it's really bendable. Just for this specific design, trees have kind of some sharp edges, so I want to make sure that it really curves around there nicely. And I'm going to cut a piece of the twine, and I'm going to roughly find the middle and line it up in the middle of the bottom of my tree. And then I'm just going to take each side and I'm just going to glue it to the edges that I've drawn out. It just is really nice to have a little bit of a guide. Even I cannot do this and trust myself that it'll actually go well. So we're going to cut off the ends and we're going to glue everything in place. For me, I decided to take a little bit of a different sort of string just because it's a little bit thicker and I needed to use it up. But we're going to start at the top of our jar at the back so that our seams line up. Again, you'll sort of see that play out a little bit better as we go along. And we're going to go around the top of our jar. We're going to go all the way to the back. We're going to trim it, and we're just going to keep on going down our jar. Now that we're getting to the actual tree part, it gets a little bit different. We're actually going to start our string by our design. That way the two ends sort of meet on either side of the Christmas tree. And as you can see a little bit here, you can see why I started at the back with the other strings, because I wanted the seam to be consistent, and since it's the back of the jar, might as well. I'd rather that be towards the back. But we're essentially going to repeat this process. We're going to keep going around the tree, and of course after we get past that design, it'll just be normal all the way around. And because I use a little bit of a thinner string, I decided to do another layer over my design just to make sure that the shape, the tree, was very prominent. So now that our jar is complete, I'm going to be mixing up the color. I've definitely developed a different color palette for Christmas. I like a little bit more of a muted red and not a super bright red. So I'm using a lot of red and green to sort of neutralize it, make it more gray, and also add in some brown to sort of give it a very warm tone. And now we're just gonna go around our jar. I suggest a little bit of a smaller paintbrush, that way you can get around that Christmas tree or whatever design really easily. But of course it is just glass. If I really needed to, if I got some paint on there, I could go in with my weeding tool that I used earlier and just sort of take it off essentially. And now just to do some finishing touches, and also I did a couple coats of the red just in case you were wondering, and we're going to wrap it around the top of the jar just to give it a fun sort of rustic feel. And as you can see, I'm sort of gluing it in a few different places to make sure it stays. And I'm going to be taking a little piece of greenery. After doing this, I feel like I should have taken a piece of greenery that was not super sparkly or frosted, but I loved how it turned out. It's a very rustic DIY, and I think it's fun to put little fairy lights in it and just have it sort of sparkle. Like, it's a very fun and, again, super easy to personalize. Now we're going to be getting into our big sign DIYs. These can get really pricey, so I wanted to find a way to make them for cheap. So I have another piece of aspen wood that's 8 inches by 24 inches with a little block of wood screwed into the back to allow it to stand. And again, it's sanded down, it's cleaned off, and we're going to be painting it. I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit of a different technique in a second here because I made 2 signs. But for this one, we're going to keep it very simple. We're going to paint it white. Again, multiple coats that are thin, and we're just going to let it dry in between and let it dry completely before we put on our design. Now I'm going to start working on my design. As you sort of see at the beginning of this clip, I had a rough idea of what I wanted to go for, and now I'm just sort of breaking everything up into pieces. Now this is a little bit complicated because I only have a 12 by 12 Cricut mat, so I needed to break everything down so it would fit on my sign nicely because my sign is 24 inches long, and obviously you can get mats that are that long, but I don't have one. It's kind of hard to explain if you don't have a Cricut, but I essentially made all of these separate elements, uploaded them into Design Space, and put everything how I wanted it to be. And I thought that this turned out really fun. I wanted to go for a very classic red and white theme, so I thought a candy cane company was like the perfect way to do that. And now I'm going in with some black vinyl. Again, this doesn't matter what color we're using for this one. Later on when we make a different sign, it will matter. So I'm just gonna let my Cricut do the work. I'm gonna sit back and watch it. For some reason, it's very satisfying, so enjoy these clips. And now that our design is cut out, I'm going to go in with my weeding tool and I'm going to weed out all of the words. And because I did have to piece this together again, it's gonna look a little bit different, but I essentially cut everything up into pieces and sort of stuck it on there. I tried to find the center of everything and just make sure everything was lined up. It's a little bit of a tricky process, but again, if you have that longer mat, it definitely does come in handy, and I'm considering adding it to my Christmas list this year. But we're gonna do the sort of same thing. The base of our sign is white, so that's going to be the first couple coats that we do over our entire design. We're gonna let it dry completely, and then we're gonna go in with our other color. And because I paint a lot, I'm going to be using the leftover red from our mason jar DIY, and I just really wanted to use this up. And again, I'm going in with a smaller brush just because I'm very close to sort of getting this color all over my whiteboard, so I just want to be as precise as I can. That way I need to do minimal touch-ups. And while our design is still wet, we're going to peel away all of the tape and the vinyl. We're going to let it dry a bit and make some final touch-ups with the red and the white. And this part just does take a little bit of patience. I am definitely not one that loves touch-ups, but they're definitely worth it. So take your time, just have fun with it, and it's gonna turn out really, really well. And then after I touched it up a little bit, I ended up painting in a little bit of an arc to sort of go around my design because I felt like it needed just a little bit of something. And I just love how this turned out. It's very simplistic, very classic red and white, and it's just a really fun sign that I think is going to look really, really great in our home. And if I didn't say this already, make sure that you stay tuned for my Christmas clean and decorate with me. That'll be coming out in a couple weeks, and maybe I'll be able to utilize this sign. So this may look very similar to our last sign, and it is. It's the same exact size and everything, but this time I'm going to be taking a few different shades of brown and some white. I call this sort of like a lazy stain. We're going to go on our board. We're going to, for real, just squeeze all of the paint onto our board very roughly, and we're going to work very fast in blending everything together. And this, again, really depends on the sort of stain look that you want. I wanted something that was a little bit more on the warm side, but I thought the white really pulled out some fun highlights. And this is something that's really, really easy. You literally don't even need like put the paint on a plate or anything like that. You literally just put it on there. You work fast just so it doesn't dry and everything blends well, and it just gives it a really, really fun look. And there's so many different stain combinations you can do, and I ended up doing this on the front, the back, and the sides. I didn't end up doing it on the bottom because I already kind of know where this is going to end up, so I didn't think it was a big deal. And I didn't really show this part, but I had a design, and I actually took out the outside this time, and I did it in white vinyl on my Cricut because we're not going to be painting the words on this one. So I'm just using my transfer tape to line everything up, and I just want to make sure that everything is really, really good on there. And also the T was a little bit out of alignment, so I ended up taking that off and sort of putting it on there manually myself. And now we're gonna take a little bit of a step back to where we were painting our trees. I made a fun little color palette of greens and browns, and we're going to be painting some beautiful pine trees. This is a Farm Fresh Christmas tree sign after all, and we're going to start with our darkest green shade, and then we're just going to keep on getting lighter and lighter gradually. This is something that's really, really fun to do, and it's another one of those things where you can get away with the paint still being a little bit wet. Like, you don't need to wait for everything to be dry. And I decided to just add in some highlights there and some snow. I really just wanted to make this look very organic, and I didn't want any red in this design. And I ended up putting a little bit of snow on the bottom and then taking the end of my paintbrush to make some snow falling. I just think that this is a really fun, I keep on saying organic, but it's just very, very earthy, and it's very fun. I brought this one upstairs when I was done, and my family loved it. It's just such a fun sign, and you don't even have to go through the actual staining process. It's so easy, and a really fun thing that you can apply to really any size sign. And that is going to be it for today's video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, and you let me know which DIY was your favorite. Of course, I loved the signs that I made. I love them all, but I'm also like very excited about the little ornaments and the jar, and it's just, there's so many different things that I'm excited to incorporate. And speaking of which, my Christmas clean and decorate is going to be coming out in a couple weeks, I believe 2 weeks from when this video comes out. So make sure that you're subscribed, you turn on those notifications so that you don't miss it, because I'll be using a lot of these DIYs and also things from my like shop with me video in this year's decorating video. So I'm really excited to be able to change things up in there, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful start to your holiday season, and I can't wait to see you guys next Wednesday for my next video. Bye.